How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 1.
My fellow Americans, welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the nation. The phone number, 877-973-7425. If you want to be on the program, well, I got to be honest with you, traveling on Friday and having to do this show and also the Carathon down at WOKV in Jacksonville, I was a little bit concerned that we would get some real breaking news out of that Alaska summit, and there was nothing. There wasn't a lot. In fact, I think it signals that the Trump administration's unwillingness to really talk about it suggests that nothing substantive really came other than a willingness to talk. What I find bizarre, though, is the absolute tribalism that the president of the United States sitting down with Vladimir Putin was not a bad thing. It was actually a good thing that the president of the United States would sit with the president of Russia. And the attacks on Trump for sitting with Vladimir Putin, I think, were just really, really bizarre stuff. It's rank tribalism by the left. I want to begin with this audio from David Brooks, who on Friday I spent time with his column in the New York Times about the class segregation in society. But just listen to this.
I think it was progress just that it happened. He gave credibility to a war criminal. So I don't count that as progress. I want to say this is the weirdest press conference to have to try to comment about. Because it was like watching two guys eat salad, and then I'm supposed to say, here's what it means for world history. Like they like Vladimir Putin talked like Sarah Palin about how close Alaska is to Russia, and then Trump was making moon eyes at his dear friend Vladimir, and they talked about sort of agreements, but there was nothing there, as Jonathan said. The words that leapt out at me, there was the word agreement in there, so maybe there's some agreement. The word that leapt out at me is what Vladimir Putin said, root causes. Now, when Vladimir Putin talks about root causes, that is the same demands he's been making since the start of this war. Right. He wants territory that his army has not conquered. He wants to control who runs the regime of Ukraine, no Zelensky, no NATO membership, a whole bunch of other stuff. No support for Ukraine. These are non-negotiables.
Listen, he gave credibility to a war criminal. He gave credibility to the president of the Russian Federation. You may not like Vladimir Putin. I don't. I think he's an evil man. But he is the leader of a massive nation, the largest nation on the planet, at war in Ukraine. And hearing him out, I think, is kind of what you have to do. The rolling of the red carpet. There were pictures of soldiers rolling out a red carpet before Putin's plane, and people were outraged by it. I can't believe we would roll out the red carpet for this war criminal. This is the worst thing ever. Barack Obama literally flew drones and killed American citizens. Barack Obama killed American citizens with no due process, with drones, and these people are like, rolling out the red carpet's the worst thing a president has ever done. No. I assure you, Franklin Roosevelt rounding Japanese Americans up and putting them in intern camps was worse than rolling out a red carpet. Can you have some perspective on this? There wasn't a lot that was accomplished, but it wasn't the worst thing ever. I will say this. I think that was there any sort of significance in the meeting, we wouldn't have Marco Rubio say, we can't tell you what was accomplished. I think that there would be things there that they would leak out. And there were some about security negotiations and the like, but Rubio did have a fair point talking to Martha Raddatz.
I mean, critics of President Trump are always going to find something to criticize. You don't even pay attention to it anymore. But I will tell you this, Putin is already on the world stage. He's already on the world stage. The guy's conducting a full-scale war in Ukraine. He's already on the world stage. He has the world's largest tactical nuclear arsenal in the world and the second largest strategic nuclear arsenal in the world. He's already on the world stage. When I hear people say that, oh, it elevates him, well, all we do is talk about Putin all the time. All the media's done is talk about Putin all the time for the last 4 or 5 years. That doesn't mean he's right about the war. That doesn't mean he's justified about the war. Put all that aside. It means you're not going to have a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine. You're not going to end a war between Russia and Ukraine without dealing with Putin. That's just common sense. I shouldn't even have to say it.
He's right. And so you have to get him a seat at the table to talk to him. It genuinely is nonsense that we shouldn't have treated the president of Russia like he is actually a world leader. He is. So you roll out the red carpet, and then you know what Donald Trump did? He flew a B-2 bomber over his head. One of the B-2 bombers that dropped the weapons on Iran flew over Vladimir Putin's head while he was on the red carpet. And the left doesn't want to give him that. They pretend it didn't happen. Yes, he rolled out the red carpet, and then he flew a B-2 bomber that had dropped a bunker buster bomb over Vladimir Putin's head, and you people are so intellectually dishonest, you cannot acknowledge the symbolism of that. No, there wasn't a lot accomplished, and there really is concern about the president now trying to placate the Russians. The Europeans are all showing up at the White House at any moment now. They're going to start. But you know what? Here's the thing. The polling has shifted within Ukraine. Here's Harry Itten on CNN.
There have been some absolutely major shifts. The idea that Ukraine's going to achieve complete victory, that idea has collapsed within Ukrainian society. What are we talking about here? Ukrainians on the war versus Russia. You go back to 2022, the start of the war. Fight until Ukraine wins. Look at this. The vast majority, about 3/4, 73% agreed with that position. Negotiate to end the war as soon as possible, only 22%. Look at where we are now. It's a complete flip. It's the inverse. Now 69% want to negotiate to end the war as soon as possible, compared to just 24% who want to fight until Ukraine wins. That's a 49-point drop in this position. Now, of course, negotiating to end the war as soon as possible, that's a bit more nuanced, right? Ukrainians don't want to agree to all of Russia's demand, but I think the idea of even there being some territory that would be not formally recognized as being given that Russia could in fact stay in, that does have majority support, but the idea of formal recognition of Russia's demands, absolutely not. Yes.
Now, Volodymyr Zelensky insists he can't give up land, Ukrainian land, under the Ukrainian constitution. I'm pretty sure he's going to have to. One of the concerns is a security guarantee, because here's the real overarching problem. You have peace. The Russians keep the Donbas. They keep Crimea. They keep some of the land they've taken. What's to stop Vladimir Putin from surging his army, building up capacity, and then invading to take the rest of Ukraine? What's to happen? Rubio was asked about this by Martha Raddatz on CNN.
Does the president favor giving up territory that Ukraine now controls, specifically in the Donetsk region? Sources are telling us that's what was asked.
Well, first of all, I mean, Putin has given repeated speeches now for 2.5 years. There's one they always cite, which talks about taking most of Ukraine and his view of history and how, so forth and so on. The second thing the president, so we know what their side is demanding, and we obviously know the Ukrainians are not in agreement with any of that. The second point I would make is the president has said repeatedly, when it comes to territories and territorial claims, that's ultimately something Ukraine will have to decide. It's their territory. It's their country. Ultimately, what they're willing to live with is what they'll have to decide on. Maybe the answer is they're not willing to live with any of this. We don't know, but that's what we need to explore. In the meantime, the one thing we do know that Ukraine has said repeatedly and publicly talked about is security guarantees. They need to be able to enter into security guarantees that ensure that this is never going to happen again, that they're not going to get reinvaded in 2.5 or 3 years or 4 years or whenever it may be. They don't want to be back here again. They want to be able to go on to rebuild their country and live their lives. That's a very reasonable request. That's something we're working on, and that's something the Russian side has to understand, obviously, is that as a sovereign country, Ukraine has a right, like every sovereign country, to enter into security alliances and agreements with other countries. So these are some of the things that we'll be discussing.
It makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense, but also concessions. Rubio was also on with Margaret Brennan on Face Nation. He made the rounds yesterday, going everywhere. He's on Meet the Press. He was on. He did the what was it? The full Ginsburg Back in the day, Ben Ginsburg, famous lawyer for the Republicans during 2000, he would go on all the shows, Fox News Sunday, Meet the Press, Face the Nation this week, and Rubio did the same thing yesterday with all of them. Here he is with Margaret Brennan.
Ultimately, if Vladimir Putin is going to be offered land that he has not seized yet, but negotiates his way into, doesn't this set a dangerous precedent that the United States now accepts this concept that it is okay to seize land by force?
Well, Putin's already seized land by force, and that in and of itself is not a positive precedent. This whole war
Are you
is
demanding a withdrawal?
Precedent. Well, again, in order to have a deal here to reach the end of this conflict, both sides are going to have to make concessions. That's just a fact.
Does that mean
in any negotiation,
where Russian forces are?
But this is not about acceptance. This is about what Ukraine can accept and what Russia can accept. They both have to accept it. Otherwise, there won't be a peace deal. Okay? If there aren't concessions, if one side gets everything they want, that's called surrender. That's called the end of the war through surrender. And that's not what we're close to doing, because neither side here is on the verge of surrender or anything close to it. So in order for there to be a peace deal, this is just a fact. We may not like it. It may not be pleasant. It may be distasteful. But in order for there to be an end of the war, there are things Russia wants that it cannot get, and there are things Ukraine wants that it's not going to get. Both sides are going to have to give up something in order to get to the table, in order to make this happen. That's just the way it is. And I mean, the sooner we accept that, that's the reality. Now, what those things are is going to be up to both sides. There's no conditions that can be imposed on Ukraine. They're going to have to accept things, but they're going to have to get things too. And so, for example, Ukraine is a sovereign country. They have a right, like every sovereign country does in the world, to enter into security alliances with other countries to prevent an invasion in the future, to prevent threats to their national security. That's not an unreasonable request. That's something that needs to be worked on. Territories will have to be discussed.
Margaret Brennan is probably the dumbest of all of them on it. It really, really is. One more, though. This is Marco Rubio now with Kristen Welker on Meet the Press.
Mr. Secretary, you were one of the few people in that room with President Putin and President Trump. You got to look him in the eyes. Do you believe that President Putin believes in Ukraine's right to exist based on what you heard and saw?
Well, look, I wasn't playing any of those games about looking people in the eye and trying to read their minds. I'm reading actions. And that's what we're looking at is actions. What will you agree to? What will you commit to? And what will you follow up on? And in order for this war to end, Russia will have to take actions. Ukraine will have to take actions. Ukraine's partners and allies will have to take actions as well to enforce that peace in the long term. That's what we're interested in. Not all, I get all the drama around this stuff. But at the end of the day, we are talking about a war in which people are being killed and maimed every single day, in which a country has been dismembered by 20%, as you've just pointed out. And it's really important to bring this war to an end. This war doesn't get better. It gets worse as time goes on. It gets worse. It actually threatens to spill over into other areas. So it needs to be stopped. That's why the president's made it a priority. And that's what we're focused on. Concrete actions by both sides, especially the Russian side, to bring this conflict to an end. And we're going to do everything we can to make it happen. Is it possible? I don't know, but we're going to try. We've tried. We've spent a lot of time on this issue. We have a lot of other issues to focus on, but the president's made this a priority, and he deserves credit for that.
He does. He does. And it's just interesting how the left does not want to give Donald Trump any credit whatsoever. They want to attack him for meeting with Vladimir Putin, the man who's orchestrated a war on Ukraine. They're attacking him for his tweets. I agree to a degree that his tweets seem to put a lot of the burden on Ukraine. But here's the reality is that Volodymyr Zelensky insists they will give up no territory whatsoever. The Ukrainians are going to have to give up territory, and now 70% of Ukrainians recognize they're going to have to give up territory. One of the few who doesn't is the president of Ukraine. I support Ukraine. I support funding Ukraine to kill the Russians. But at some point, the war's got to end. They've had territory taken from them. The Russians have doubled down on the territory. The Ukrainians haven't taken the territory back from the Russians. So at some point, it's going to behoove the Ukrainians to recognize that they're going to have to give up some territory if they want to end the war, and then they can stockpile arms and landmines to keep the Russians from reinvading. Greetings, conversationalists. I should let you know I don't actually have a call screener today. He had a outpatient procedure. I told him to stay home and rest, and I'm at the flagship station, and it was just a convoluted mess. So nonetheless, I'm here We've got, let's see, right now happening at the White House, looks like Italian Prime Minister Meloni is arriving at the White House. She's outside shaking hands with, looks like Monica Crowley there to greet her at the door, headed into the White House. All the European leaders coming in. Now, this is the thing. Trump likes her a lot. Some of the European leaders he really likes, and they are concerned that he may, based on his statements overnight, possibly, well, do a little bit too much to help Vladimir Putin, and they're a little bit concerned, and they got a right to be concerned because they want the United States engaged on this. I know none of you want to spend your money helping the Ukrainians, and the way that Trump has it structured now, it is we don't spend our money, the Europeans spend their money, and in the process buy our weapons, and that's actually a great thing for all of us around. So when we come back, I actually want to spend a little bit of time talking about how we navigate this process and what do we actually do to, well, help the Ukrainians, and what do we actually do to navigate this situation. And there are some opportunities, I think, for the United States to play a very constructive role in bringing peace about. But the wild thing here is just the hostility of the American left. They really can't bring themselves. This is a partisan thing on both sides. If I would ever compliment Biden on doing something that actually was a good thing, you'd get people on the right who would be insane about it. But on the left, it's like institutionally, they can't bring themselves to acknowledge that maybe it's a good thing we actually sit in a room with Vladimir Putin. By the way, they're attacking Donald Trump for this. Barack Obama put Medvedev, the man who wants a nuclear war with the United States, in the beast, like rode him around in the presidential limo. So spare me your outrage over Donald Trump meeting with Vladimir Putin. Partisanship has its limits. It was one of the founding ideas in the country that Hillsdale College talks about in its different classes on the Constitution 101 and the founding of the early republic. And you can take some of their great classes by going to Eric, E-R-I-C-K, ericforhillsdale.com. Sign up with Hillsdale College. You don't pay a penny for this. We started my kid back at college, moved her into the dorm on Thursday. She starts class tomorrow. And my son is intrigued because on campus on Tuesday is a college fair, and Hillsdale's going to be there. He really wants to go to Samford, but he's kind of intrigued by Hillsdale as well. So we'll check them both out. You can check out Hillsdale by taking one of their classes for free with their great faculty. Their video lectures online. Each lecture is about 30 minutes long. Depending on the class you pick, it depends on how many lectures there are, but the 30 minutes long, you do it at your own pace, and then you get a certificate of completion. You don't pay a penny. ericforhillsdale.com. There's surely a subject out there, from math to chemistry to politics to philosophy to literature to history. There's a subject out there you're interested in, and you can learn a lot about it. Education, not indoctrination, with Hillsdale College. You go to Eric, E-R-I-C-K, ericforhillsdale.com today. Sign up with Hillsdale College and let Hillsdale take care of you. ericforhillsdale.com. Hello there. Welcome. There is a rumor that Andrew Bailey, the Attorney General of Missouri, is heading to D.C. to become a deputy director of the FBI. There's no confirmation here, but this does sound very much like this is a thing that is happening. Let's see if the rumor, I'm texting him right now, if the rumor is true, congratulations. All right, now we must move on to the European leaders headed to the White House. The British Prime Minister has just shown up. War is not something anyone wanted. So there is this idea that people want forever wars, and it's a lie started by people who want to be isolationists, and they've really convinced themselves that if the United States just packed up, came home, took all of our soldiers out of every country everywhere, and left the world alone, that everyone would be fine and we would at least be safe and we would be unbothered. And it's simply not true. And they have an easy argument because it's based on an alluring lie that proves a negative. They can argue this because they know it's not going to happen. And so they can always say, well, if we had it my way, we wouldn't have any wars and we would be safe. Well, you're never going to have it your way, so it's easy for you to say, we had it your way once, and what did we get? World War I, and we tried it again, and what did we get? World War II. The United States is the leader of the free world. If we leave the world stage, you're not going to get peace in our times. What you're going to get is a world that aligns against the United States because we have the strongest economy for now. You know, global exchanges are based on the dollar. Why? Because we're the leader of the world. If we pack up and come home, well, that's not going to last. You know, we have the international calling prefix. Those of you who never call abroad, there are all sorts of numbers that you have to put in before you call someone overseas. 011 or 097. You know what? When you want to put the international prefix in for the United States, you know what you put in? 1. Why? 011 is the United States. Why? Because we're number 1. We lead the world. We invented the phone. We lead the world. We are the first prefix for calling internationally. You want to give all this stuff up? All transactions globally, for the most part, they're a growing body of exceptions thanks to the BRIC nations, but those transactions are in American dollars. It saves us money on transaction rates, on exchange rates. It saves us on interest rates. As bad as our inflation is, it's less than other places. As bad as our unemployment is, it's better than other places. Why? Because we're the number 1 global economy. We're the global powerhouse. You pack up, you leave the world, you come home, that goes away. China becomes dominant. And China's friends, Russia and Iran, become dominant. Do you really think they're going to be friends with you? And you know what's so interesting is a lot of the people who are the most isolationist say America first, rah, rah, but they're going to be subservient to the Chinese. Do you really think that your First Amendment's going to get you very far when the Chinese are the global powerhouse that says, okay, you can have your First Amendment, but nobody's going to trade with you favorably anymore if you keep allowing people to say these things? You can't give up on the world stage, and that means American leadership, and that means American leadership abroad, and that means American leadership over what to do with Ukraine. The leaders of the world are showing up right now. I'm watching live coverage of the White House here. Melania has shown up. The British Prime Minister is showing up. Volodymyr Zelensky is showing up. He's not going to wear a suit. His designers say, bad look, I think, for it to be leaked out that way by Politico, that his designers say. He's not wearing a suit. He should probably wear a suit. I think that's ridiculous. The Finnish president, Alexander Stubb, has just arrived at the White House. The European leaders are concerned that President Trump is going to let Ukraine hang. And one of the reasons is because the Russians have shown themselves to not be at war with just Ukraine. There have been, particularly Finland, as the Finnish prime minister or president arrives, there has been a massive sabotage operation throughout Europe that we know and they know are the Russians. In Finland, communications corridors have been sabotaged, power transformers have been sabotaged, transmission lines have been sabotaged, undersea internet cables in the Baltic Sea have been sabotaged, Russian ships were in the area at the time. It's not just Ukraine. But concurrent to all that, if we want peace in Ukraine, Ukraine's going to have to give up some land. And if I listen, if you're a longtime listener to this program, you know I'm a big defender of Ukraine. I want the Ukrainians to kill the Russians so we don't have to. But it seems pretty clear to me that at this point, you're going to give up land to the Russians. If you want to have peace, you're going to give up some land. You're going to give up some land because the Russians have now entrenched in that area. You can't get it back, so you're probably going to have to give it up. A lot of that area is native Russian speakers to begin with. You're probably going to have to give up some land. And I think that the Ukrainians are going to have to come to terms with that if they really want peace. And I think most Ukrainians have come to terms with that. And I think the Europeans recognize that we're not going to get the Russians out of that section now. They've doubled down. They have fortified their positions. It'll be very hard to get them out. But what we can do is we can arm the rest of Ukraine. We can give them security guarantees. We can move soldiers into the western portion of Ukraine. But the isolationists won't like that. It's been very interesting to see Marco Rubio be on television as much as he has over the last 48 hours, because the J.D. Vance wing of the party, the vice president's wing, is very isolationist. Matt Whitaker, who was an acting attorney general and a deputy attorney general, is now an ambassador. He is the NATO ambassador. He was on with Dana Perino talking about what's coming today with the Europeans.
Well, it is a huge day at the White House today. President Trump will meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and then after that, he will sit down with European heads of state. Now, this is all part of a big diplomatic push to bring peace to Ukraine. And U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Matt Whitaker, joins us now. Great to have you here. Can't have a better guest this morning. One of the things that the European Commissioner President said is that this is welcome to them because the issue of security guarantees is on the table. Watch her here.
We welcome President Trump's willingness to contribute to Article 5-like security guarantees for Ukraine. And the coalition of the willing, including the European Union, is ready to do its share.
Can you elaborate on that to the extent possible before this meeting?
Yeah, well, certainly that is going to be the number one topic, I think, today, in addition to President Zelensky responding to what President Trump heard from President Putin on Friday. And the security guarantees, when you talk about Article 5-like guarantees, obviously the security guarantees would be outside of NATO because Ukraine is not a member of NATO. But a lot of the members of NATO, especially in this coalition of the willing she mentioned, which is Great Britain, Germany, France, and several other big European countries, are going to be providing that assistance. They obviously want the United States involved. The United States provides certain capabilities that aren't available to anybody else on the globe. And so that discussion is going to be a big part of what the Europeans today talk about with the president.
How does all of this get secured? Like, what is when we say guarantee and it's a possibility of U.S. involvement, how do you understand U.S. involvement in this case?
Yeah, ultimately that's up for President Trump to determine. A lot of it could be command and control, doesn't necessarily need to be American troops, but at the same time, obviously, Ukraine and the European countries would love the United States to be involved in some way. I don't expect, but we'll see. We'll see how President Trump negotiates this.
What are the security guarantees? Listen, I think the president cut a really good deal with NATO allies. They buy our weapons. We know they're going to convey them to Ukraine. They convey them to Ukraine. Ukraine stockpiles the latest and greatest tech. It gives us money to build even more latest and greatest tech for us. We're able to rearm. We're able to stockpile. Ukraine is able to arm. Europe is able to fund it on their dime, not our dime. It's a good guarantee. And maybe, just maybe, that there are greater security guarantees that we can agree to. I'm not sure. But I think it's got to be possible. And I think what the left has to do is get it out of their head that somehow everything Donald Trump does is carrying water for the Russians. He's not carrying water for Vladimir Putin. Even Bill Maher called this out on his program on Friday night, that this is a zombie myth that Donald Trump is in the pocket of the Russians, but everyone who hates Donald Trump sees everything through the lens of he is in the pocket of the Russians. He's not. He just doesn't want war. He did not start wars his first term. He doesn't want war now. He recognizes as president, though, he's got strategic obligations to keep the United States safe, and sometimes that means dropping a bunker buster on Iran. But if we're going to have peace, if we're going to end this war, It just seems painfully obvious, even to people like me who strongly support Ukraine's right to defend itself, that they're going to have to come to terms with giving up some land. They can't insist on returning the whole country. They lost. They don't have to completely surrender, but they're going to have to give up some land. Now, I understand there are people who say, well, swapping land for peace is not necessarily a great deal. That's true. But with security guarantees, it becomes a pretty good deal. You know, with Israel gave land to Gaza. What do? They built up a terrorist hotbed of Hamas, and they reinvaded, and now they're at war, and everybody's blaming Israel. The land for peace deal, it was a bad option for Israel, but there were no international security guarantees for Israel. Put in security guarantees, and maybe, just maybe, we can wind this thing down. I support allowing the Ukrainians to kill the Russians, and if they're using European dollars and not our dollars, so much the better. At some point, we have to recognize that the Russians are not our friends and they don't want to be our friends. They are friends now with China and Iran, two countries that are opposed to us. The Russians are opposed to us. But we have an opportunity to at least wind this down if we're realistic. And I don't think it's realistic at this point to insist to Ukraine that you can have everything back. You're not going to have everything back. You made a mistake believing that the Russians would keep you safe to begin with. The Americans should keep their promise to keep you safe. But that's going to require a surrender of some level of land. And we will arm you and stockpile you with weapons and landmine your border so the Russians can't cross in without great difficulty into the rest of your land. But something's got to happen in order to get some level of peace. And if the Europeans come to the White House today and insist, let's expand the war, I think that's a foolish thing. If they want to actually find peace, then they're going to need to all pile on Volodymyr Zelensky and say, you're going to have to give up some land, give up some territory, and we'll keep the rest of you safe. And here's what we're going to do to keep you safe. And here it is in writing, and we'll guarantee it. But in the war, so we can focus on China, because China in Taiwan is going to be the next big fight. And you know, what we do here echoes into that fight as well. Swiss America has been the trusted leader in this country for 40 years with precious metals, and they've been warning people about a secret war on cash. They would love to help you safeguard your hard-earned cash from the secret war, but you need their free report to do it. They're rated A+ by the Better Business Bureau, and they can educate you on protecting your assets. Their report, The Secret War on Cash, takes less than 15 minutes to read. It can save on your retirement and finances. You get a free copy by calling or texting 800-289-2646. The All-Out War on Cash includes digital forms of currency, and it's growing. So get and read The Secret War on Cash report completely free from Swiss America. Just mention my name, Eric, E-R-I-C-K, when you call or text 800-289-2646. That's 800-289-2646. You can also go to SwissAmerica.com/Eric, SwissAmerica.com/ERICK, or call them or just text them my name, Eric. Follow the link. It's 800-289-2646. Let Swiss America help you. Message and data rates may apply. Hello there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. Big day on a certain network. Over to you, Joe Scarborough.
We will become MS Now, which stands for My Source for News, Opinion, and the World. And look, Andrew, they even have a graphic up. I like it.
There it is.
Actually,
the new logo.
It looks very sporty.
PMS Now. Can you imagine the reporter? I didn't say anything to you. What? Nothing. I said nothing. I'm angry. No, I'm not. I'm not angry. They even have a little flag before the MS that actually looks like a P. I mean, they're just following it. But here's the thing. It is the most unoriginal logo. Like there's no customization of the font. It's like Arial and Times New Roman or Georgia 1, and it's not original at all. It is not original in any way, shape, or form. Their little flag looks like the Human Rights Campaign, the little blue square with the yellow equal sign in the middle for the gay rights group. It kind of looks like that. It's not original at all, and boy, we can riff on the PMS Now instead of the PMS NBC Now, and God bless them. But here's the larger issue here. In all seriousness, I'm not a fan of the network, but in all seriousness, it's not original. It's iterative, and I do wonder if they used AI for it. Because it does not look like, I mean, we joke about hiring McKinsey consultants, but you hire McKinsey consultants to do something that is more unique than iterative. And it's not compelling. It's going to be still the same people yelling at you every day that democracy is under attack, but now with more jokes about it being PMS now. Democracy is always under attack until they get their way. Democracy under threat. They're going to have the same people doing the same thing with a very uninspired new logo and name that's just iterative. I'm curious to see what CNBC does. I still think it's a dumb idea for NBC to spin off CNBC with MSNBC. I kind of understand why they're doing it, but I mean, CNBC is like the credible network within that company. I watch CNBC on a daily basis. It's a good network that's very balanced and business-oriented and pro-free market. I'm going to be interested to see what they do. Are they going to be See Now? I have no idea. It's dumb. It's a very dumb thing that they did. When we come back, this is actually too good not to talk about. A woman in Oregon has decided to play the left's games against the left, and she is shutting down windmill projects in the state of Oregon, all because she's using the same environmental regulations the left uses to shut down nuclear power plants and oil and gas refineries and oil and gas extraction. She's using the exact same tools, and this plays into a larger story Chris Rufo exposing. We're at the New Yorker. You know, they haven't had a white male fiction contribution in years there. And it turns out that one of their most prominent journalists years ago was a diehard racist who claimed that white people were responsible for lice and every ailment on the planet. Very, very bizarre stuff. All of these stories are actually related together. I want to spin them together when we come back. But first, the environmentalists freaking out about someone using their own regulations against them to shut down windmills.